All right. Sorry, I was wrong. Hopefully you have lesson 36 pulled up. The last part of Solomon's reign. So that's found in 1 Kings chapter 11. Turn there to your Bibles, 1 Kings chapter 11. The last part of Solomon's reign. So we have seen how Solomon was blessed by God with great wisdom. And in addition to that, God gave Solomon wealth, fame, honor. Okay? Solomon had everything he could ever want. And we'll see how in this lesson that became also his downfall. It was a great blessing to him, but it was also his downfall. Solomon, we'll see here at the end of his life, begins to do what we probably do all too much. So we have to be careful. We can't think that we're any better than Solomon. Because Solomon begins to covet here at the end of his life. He wants what everyone else has. More wives, more money, more wealth, even more fame. We don't know. But these are the things that Solomon wants. And there's a good verse to point out to you, and I listed that there, Colossians 3, verse 5, and I'll read that here to you. Paul is giving the Colossians, the people at Colossae, many warnings. And one of the warnings that he gives is this. Mortify therefore your members which are upon the earth, fornication, uncleanness, inordinate affection, evil concupiscence, and covetousness, which is idolatry. So to covet something, the Bible tells us here, is to make an idol out of it. If you want something, you've made an idol out of it. And that's what Solomon's done here at the end of his life. He's made idols out of certain things. So we'll see how that is here. Okay? Start in at verse 1 of chapter 11. But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites, of the nations concerning which the Lord said unto the children of Israel, Ye shall not go into them, neither shall they come in unto you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clave unto these in love. And he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines. And his wives turned away his heart. For it came to pass, when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods. And his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. For Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. And Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord, and went not fully after the Lord, as did David his father. Then did Solomon build an high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, in the hill that is before Jerusalem, and for Molech, the abomination of the children of Ammon. And likewise did he for all his strange wives, which burnt incense and sacrificed unto their gods. And the Lord was angry with Solomon, because his heart was turned from the Lord God of Israel, which had appeared unto him twice. And he communed with him concerning this thing, that he should not go after any other gods, but he kept that which the Lord commanded. Wherefore the Lord said unto Solomon, Forasmuch as is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes which I have commanded thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee, and will give it to thy servant. Notwithstanding in thy days I will not do it for David thy father's sake, but I will rend it out of the hand of thy son. Howbeit I will not rend away all the kingdom, but will give one tribe to thy son for David my servant's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, which I have chosen. So, Solomon falls into the sin of many wives, more even than his father had. And these weren't even godly wives that he took. All Solomon was concerned about was their outward beauty, or how they looked, or what wealth or privilege they might bring him. Maybe if I marry the wife of this king over here, or the daughter of this king, then he'll make an alliance with me, or he'll give me many great gifts. Or maybe if I take this woman also and love her, then maybe she will fulfill all of my, she'll give me happiness and fulfill all of my lusts. Solomon directly disobeyed God's law to marry one wife. Why did he do it? Well, he's flattered. Remember, the Queen of Sheba came to visit and check out his kingdom. By now, probably sinful pride had begun to well up in his heart, and he wanted to be like all the other kings. Ooh, so-and-so came in, the king of so-and-so, and he told me about king of the Syrians. He has 500 wives. Well, if I want to be considered the greatest, or to have, I better have more than that. I'll have 600 wives. And then, well, the king of Egypt, he has 700 wives. Well, I better have 800. The king of Babylon, he has 900. I better have 1,000 wives. And so, Solomon, that would be one reason. He's getting all of this fame and all of this attention because of the grandeur of his kingdom. But the one area that he's weak in is the number of wives. So he begins to have more and more wives. Okay? He wanted to be better than the other kingdom around him. Okay? And we read here too, we knew that he built more and bigger and better palaces and gardens and all kinds of other buildings around there. He was trying to impress everybody. Okay? So, he had 700 wives, we read of, and 300 concubines. These would not all these wives would not have lived in his palace at one time. Some of them probably came and went. They were with him for a few weeks, a few days, a few months, and then they left and went somewhere else. But in God's eyes, he treated them as his wives. Okay? So, that's with great sadness that we have to read about that. But what did the influence, what was the impact of this? Whenever we commit sin, there's an impact. There's not just the committing of the sin that's causing trouble or problems, but there's more. There's other things going on beyond that. Well, in Solomon's case, it wasn't just that he had many wives and that he was committing the sin of adultery, but these wives turn his heart and he begins to fall into the sin of idolatry, worshiping other gods besides the Lord. They turned his heart so that he built altars throughout God's land. He did it. Solomon commissioned the building altars. Why? Well, maybe this wife over here, she said, well, Solomon, my God, I've got to sacrifice him. Oh, well, no problem. I've got lots of money. I'll build you an altar over there, and you can go to that altar and sacrifice over there. And another wife might say, oh, Solomon, I really want to sacrifice to my God, the God of the Edomites. And, well, no problem. I'll order some men. They'll build you an altar over there, and then you can sacrifice on it. So Solomon was allowing his wives to burn incense and sacrifice, even if Solomon didn't do it. Okay, he might say, well, I didn't go there and worship them. Solomon is supporting it. He is giving the finances. He's giving the men, the place. This is God's land. He ought to wipe that out, destroy them, have nothing to do with them. But Solomon does not do that here. Okay? So, who does he build them for? Well, we read a few there. Ashtaroth, the moon goddess of all the tribes of the Canaanites. Milcom, a king god of the Ammonites and the Moabites. And this is the wicked one where people who were worshiping these gods would offer their children as sacrifices. Can you imagine your mom and dad taking away your younger brother or sister and say, well, we're going to have to go put them on the altar over there and burn them up alive? You'd be heartbroken. You'd be shaken, but that's what these were doing. And Chemosh, he was known as a sun god and a war god. That was for various tribes. They all worshipped him. So it wasn't happening necessarily in God's temple, but it was all around God's temple that these things were happening. That was the foolishness of marrying an ungodly wife. When you want godly spouses, you should, as you grow older, have opportunity. You want to find a wife or a husband who loves the Lord. You find someone who doesn't really care about the Lord, it's not going to go the opposite way. You aren't going to find that, oh, They know nothing. I'll teach them everything. Let them be taught first, and then make them your wife. Don't think, I can marry this ungodly person, and then I'll teach her everything, and then she'll become godly. More often than not, what we find is the opposite is true. They take you and make you ungodly. Okay? So, first, make sure they're a godly person. First, ensure that they love the Lord and obey His commandments and desire to live the same way that you want to live, and then marry them. Don't think that you can marry an ungodly heathen person and then make them godly. Okay? That's a dangerous, dangerous thing. Not to say that it could never happen. Reading the Bible happen, but it's very, very difficult. Well, what's the punishment for Solomon? The punishment here God promises him is that I'm going to take away the kingdom. Now God probably didn't come here. He probably sent a prophet to Solomon to tell us, but I'm going to take away all of the tribes. Well, except one. We'll get into that a little bit later, but I'm going to take them all away except one. That's going to be your punishment. It won't happen in your lifetime, Solomon, but it will happen eventually in days. I won't do it now, but I'm going to do it during the days of your sons. Okay? So, we keep reading on. If we see here, there are other problems that came up. In verse 14 it talks about Hadad, the Edomite, comes in, and he comes and he strove in the land and creates all kind of trouble. Okay? And then later, Paran. There rose out of Midian and came to Paran, and others came to Egypt. Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Okay? And other types of trouble. So, we know that during David's lifetime, what was the greatest threat to the people of Israel? The greatest threat had been the nations that were around them, the Philistines, the Ammonites, the Syrians, the Edom. They kept coming and attacking Israel. During Solomon's lifetime, that hadn't happened. It had been a life of peace thus far. It had been a nice place to live here in Canaan. It had been pretty peaceful and easy, and it was not very hard. But now, all of a sudden, all of these other nations begin to once again, the Lord, we can say that during Solomon's reign thus far, the Lord had restrained the enemies. And now the Lord begins to loose those strings that were holding them back. And the nations are once again able to go into Canaan and create trouble there. Okay? And so that's what happens here. Trouble begins to be had. Okay? And people of Israel are attacked, and they begin to attack King Solomon. Now, turn to verse 26 here in chapter 11. So, we've got some mischief, we've got a little bit of troubles going on in the land once again. Solomon's not out there leading the charge. We can assume it's probably other men that he puts in charge of that. But then, the Lord wants to begin to make possible the way where the kingdom will be stripped out of the hands of Solomon, and only one nation, one tribe will be left. Only Judah will be left to King David's line. And that's what happens here, starting at verse 26 of 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 26. And Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, an Ephrathite of Zerida, Solomon's servant, whose mother's name was Zeruiah, a widow woman, even he lifted up his hand against the king. And this was the cause that he lifted up his hand against the king. Solomon built Milo and repaired the breaches of the city of David his father. And the man Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor. And Solomon, seeing the young man that he was industrious, he made him ruler over all of the charge of the house of Joseph. And when it came to pass at that time when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem, that the prophet Ahijah, the Shilonite, found him in the way, and he had clad himself with a new garment, and they too were alone in the field. And Ahijah caught the new garment that was on him, and rent it in 12 pieces. And he said to Jeroboam, Take thee 10 pieces, for thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, Behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and will give thee 10 tribes to thee. But he shall have 1 tribe for my servant David's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, the city which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. So, Solomon here, this was David, and we can go all the way back to the time of Moses. Right? Moses needed helpers, other wise men who could help make decisions and plan things in the land. And that's what we see here. Solomon takes this young man. He's a very industrious man, so that means he's probably a go-getter. He's going to get his work done. He's going to look for things that maybe he doesn't even need to be told to do, and he's going to do them anyway. And that gives him an opportunity, an advancement over all the other young men. And Solomon says, I am going to put you in charge of this group of people. We read there that the people that he was over was it's king over all of the house of Joseph. So he was an important man. Okay? Well, Jeroboam here on the way between a couple of places is stopped by a prophet, the prophet Ahijah. Okay? And Jeroboam is, in a sense, and we don't necessarily read through that so much, but he is already beginning an uprising. How often, I guess we haven't seen that here in the United States, but we see that in other countries. This man is the ruler. He's the king. Okay? Or maybe he's the emperor, the president, whatever he may be, and he makes somebody else, his right-hand man, he says, you will be my chief general. You be in charge of the army. And I'll take care of all the decisions in the land, but you be in charge of the army. Well, 5 years down the road, after giving that power to that man who's the general in charge of the army, that man wants that power for himself. He says, I know, I will lead a revolt against the king, kind of like what Absalom had done. Okay? I will lead a revolt against the king, and they'll make all the people, and then we'll have a little bit of a war for a time, the people that support the other president versus me, and we'll clash, and if we can gain the victory, because we think we will, we have enough people, we will become the new rulers and leaders of the land. And that's what Jeroboam does here. He's become an important person in David's kingdom, but for whatever reason, Jeroboam decided that he wanted to be the ruler. Maybe it was, remember, maybe we could go back to that time where David had to flee out of the land. And those other tribes were not real happy with the tribe of Judah. And they wanted to make someone else their ruler. Someone else their man. Sheba was one of those men. He had his house, or his head, chopped off and thrown over the wall of the city. Maybe there's still some of that jealousy. Maybe there's still some of that negativity left here. But Jeroboam aligns himself a little bit and starts getting some things ready. And meanwhile, while he's getting things ready, that prophet Ahijah comes wearing a new robe. He comes before Jeroboam. He tears that robe into 12 pieces and lays them on the ground and tells Jeroboam, pick up 10 of them. Okay? Or gives them to Jeroboam. And then keeps one piece for himself. And he tells Jeroboam, Jeroboam, this is a picture. God is going to give you to be the ruler over 10 of these tribes. Now, some of you might be doing a little bit of math going, well, if there's 12 pieces and 10 went to Jeroboam and 1 went to, it's only 11. Obviously, the 11th tribe would be the Levites. They would probably, most of them, at least the ones living in the land of Judah, stay behind with Judah to take care of the temple. There might be other Levites spread other places, and they'll probably go with those 10 tribes. So Jeroboam is promised 10 of these tribes. And 1 would be kept for King David's sake. The reason there being, obviously, we need to keep the line of David alive. Judah had been promised that Christ would be born out of his line. And now, if the Lord were to take all of the tribes and give them to someone else and let Jeroboam is not a son of David. So Jeroboam, Christ cannot be born from Jeroboam's line. So there's always going to be that trouble now. There's going to be Israel in the north, the 10 tribes, versus Judah in the south, the 1 tribe. Okay? But the line of David, they will continue to sit on the throne as we see moving forward in Judah. In Israel, it doesn't matter. You can kill the king, and if he doesn't have any sons, it doesn't matter because the line of Christ isn't coming from the north there. It's coming from David here. So that's why God promises. 1 tribe will always remain for David's sake because Christ needs to be born of that line. Okay? And why is this going to happen? Well, King Solomon obviously began in his later life to make other things idols. The things that he coveted. Fame, wealth, many wives. Okay? All of that. And yet God still will preserve just a portion of Solomon's kingdom because his son Jesus Christ needs to come. So, Jeroboam had to flee to Egypt because King Solomon wants to try to kill him. So he flees and gets out of there and runs away to Egypt. And he stays there until Solomon dies. So we read that in the end, Solomon was king on the throne just as long as his father had been, for 40 years. For 40 years, Solomon ruled in Jerusalem. And I think that's important too, that we, what verse is that? Verse 13 of chapter 11. I'll give one tribe for David my son's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, which I have chosen. So Jerusalem there being a picture of the church, of God's people. For the sake of my people, the church, which is found in Jerusalem, I will preserve Jerusalem. Okay? So, King Solomon leaves that behind. Those altars that he had built for his wives, they're going to stay there too. They're going to stay there for a long time. So even though Solomon might be gone, he might be punished, the kingdom might be torn apart, there is still a lasting effect of worshiping those gods, and it's going to influence others down the line too. So that's a good reminder for us. When we sin, sometimes our sins have great and lasting consequences, and that's exactly what happened here to King Solomon. His sin had great, long-lasting consequences, not just to his generation, but even generations after him had to suffer because of his wickedness and his sin. Solomon would have been better off with one wife, but he couldn't withstand the temptation of being like the other kings. That's a good reminder for us too. We need to be careful that we don't fall into peer pressure or influence. You want to be like someone else, or you want to be, important like someone else. The temptation is to behave and act in a way like them. So we ought to be careful of that too.